The decline of the British economy did not begin with a sudden explosion or a dramatic market crash. Instead, it started with a quiet, persistent exodus. It began when a handful of multinational corporations decided to move their headquarters to Paris and grew as initial public offerings, IPOs, and the city of London began to dry up. Today, the city of London, the financial powerhouse that has historically served as the engine for the entire United Kingdom, is visibly stalling. This crisis transcends the world of wealthy bankers and lost bonuses. It represents a catastrophic failure of a high-stakes gamble the British government made decades ago. The leadership bet the nation's entire future on a single square mile of real estate, operating under the flawed assumption that the global capital would always flow through London. They were wrong. And as this central engine begins to fail, the rest of the country is preparing to pay a devastating price. To grasp the magnitude of the impending 2026 collapse, one must examine the structural foundations of the modern UK. For the last 40 years, successive governments did more than just favor the capital. They actively engineered the entire national economy to revolve around it. This strategy was rooted in the economic theory of agglomeration, the belief that by clustering money, elite talent, and world-class infrastructure in one geographic location, a super economy would be created, eventually lifting the rest of the nation. Consequently, resources were disproportionately funneled into London. Between 2010 and 2020, London's share of the UK's total real estate capital value surged from 34% to 42%. While the capital enjoyed gold standard transport and digital connectivity, the north of England was left to operate on crumbling, outdated systems. The resulting disparity is staggering. Today, the median household wealth in the southeast exceeds £503,000, while in the north, it is less than half that amount. Even more alarming is the wealth concentration, with the richest 10% of households holding 43% of all wealth, leaving the bottom 50% of the population to survive on just 9%. The government's logic for this imbalance was simple. London would serve as the ultimate cash cow, generating massive tax revenues to fund public services in cities like Liverpool, Manchester, and Newcastle, with the financial sector alone contributing approximately 8.5% of the UK's total GDP. The country became a dual economy. On one side stood London, a high-productivity global superstar. On the other stood the rest of the country, struggling with productivity levels that lagged significantly behind international peers. This was a deliberate trade-off. Manufacturing hubs in the North and Midlands were essentially told that their industrial decline was an acceptable sacrifice because London's financial success would provide the checks to keep them afloat. Despite modern political slogans regarding leveling up, this gap has never truly closed. By putting all their eggs in one basket, the UK left itself with zero margin for error. Without a second engine or a backup plan, the sputtering of the London financial district threatens the stability of the entire kingdom. The primary mechanism that broke London's dominance was not a scandal, but a regulatory off-switch flipped the moment the UK departed the European Union. For decades, the City of London thrived under a system known as passporting. This was the golden ticket of finance, allowing any bank based in London to sell services across Berlin, Madrid, or Rome without needing individual licenses for every country. It made London the undisputed launchpad for global finance in Europe. When Brexit occurred, passporting vanished, replaced by equivalence, a patchy, unreliable system where the EU unilaterally decides if UK rules are sufficient. Recognizing that a long-term business strategy cannot be built on a political permission slip that can be revoked at any moment, the financial sector began a massive, silent migration of capital. While doomsday forecasts predicted 100,000 jobs would disappear overnight, the reality was a more subtle but equally damaging shift of assets. According to the think tank New Financial, over 440 banking and finance firms responded to Brexit by relocating parts of their business or setting up new legal entities within the EU. Banks transferred more than £900 billion in assets from the UK to the EU, roughly 10% of the entire British banking system. Insurance firms and asset managers moved another £100 billion. In total, approximately £1 trillion in capital shifted jurisdiction. This wealth did not vanish from the world. It simply disappeared from the UK's ledger. The result is a new, multipolar financial world where London's gravity has been dispersed. Dublin has absorbed asset management, and Paris has emerged as the new hub for trading operations. Major institutions like Bank of America have moved their EU headquarters to Paris, signaling that London is no longer the center of the financial universe. The danger is not just the assets that left, but the growth that never arrived, a phenomenon known as missing jobs. Physical relocations were limited to about 7,000 roles, but employment growth in the sector has flatlined since the 2016 referendum. When a U.S. bank expands its European operations today, it hires in Paris or Frankfurt, not London. The U.K. has lost its future trajectory. This hollowing out affects the average worker as much as the elite. When a firm expands in Paris, it doesn't just hire traders, but also IT technicians, legal assistants, and office managers. The entire support ecosystem is being built across the English Channel, rather than in the UK. This is where the government's gamble completely falls apart. The plan relied on London's surplus wealth to support the nation, but as the city stalls, that surplus is evaporating. The primary transmission mechanism is tax revenue. When a high-frequency trader or a corporate lawyer is hired in Paris instead of London, the UK Treasury receives nothing. There is no cut of salary paid in France to fund the National Health Service, NHS, repair roads in Wales, or pay pensions in Yorkshire. This leaves the government with a shrinking tax base at a time when regional crises are escalating. While the financial sector faces regulatory hurdles, the manufacturing hubs in the north are being battered by trade friction. These regions depend on physical exports like cars, chemicals, and food. Since the exit from the EU, goods exports to the bloc have fallen by approximately 14%, as the administrative burden of customs checks has wiped out the margins of small businesses. The UK is now trapped in a scenario where both engines are failing simultaneously. The service engine in the south is losing global access, and the manufacturing engine in the north is being choked by red tape. Forecasts for 2026 suggest a headline GDP growth of only 1.4%. But this figure is deceptive. If the finance-dominated sectors falter, the effective growth rate for the rest of the country could drop as low as 0.5% to 0.8%. For many regions, this isn't just weak growth, it is total stagnation. This is the ultimate reckoning for 40 years of regional neglect. The golden goose is sick, and the farm it was supposed to support was never built to be self-sufficient. There are minor flickers of hope. Fintech clusters in Manchester and Leeds are growing, contributing roughly £5 billion annually to the northern economy. This proves that innovation exists outside the capital. However, the math remains brutal. £5 billion is a mere rounding error compared to the £1 trillion that shifted to Europe. The scale of the loss completely dwarfs the speed of the recovery. The UK bet everything on a single city, and that city lost its most valuable asset. Now, the bill for decades of economic imbalance is coming due in 2026, and the tragedy is that there may be nobody left to pay it.